Hello and welcome to another episode of the F1 Breakdown podcast. My name is Jack George Maynard for the newer viewers today, and if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. And today we'll be reviewing the Japanese Grand Prix. And looking back at it now, as most of you know now, because today is the Friday after the race, Sebastian Vettel went and scored his 5th victory in a row at the moment in Formula 1, which leaves him 90 points clear of Fernando Alonso in the title championship. He's not won it yet, but he needs to finish 5th with Fernando Alonso winning the race in India in order to win the title in India. But to be fair, I think, at the moment Sebastian Vettel could probably finish 6th, and Alonso probably was going to finish about 4th. And, he'd still be world championship, because I cannot see that Ferrari car, being anywhere near the top 3 come India, because it's just not with the pace at the moment. And I don't even think Fernando Alonso can bring that car forward. And as he said himself lately, that, Ferrari lost the development race this year, and Red Bull have won it convincingly. And that is why Sebastian Vettel has been able to go on and claim these 5 victories in a row. But to be fair to the other drivers, Mark Webber and Romain Grosjean, who finished on the podium alongside Vettel, they made it tough for him, because Sebastian Vettel, he made some mistakes in that race, which was, strange to see. And people put it down to pressure of him, knowing that he could have won the championship on that day. So because he was locking up, he had a poor start, allowing Grosjean to get past down into turn 1. Well, Grosjean got past both Red Bulls down into turn 1, and Vettel kept 3rd, and he nearly lost a place to Hamilton, but then they ended up clipping, and Hamilton had a punch out which caused him to retire from the Grand Prix. But if they didn't clip, if it was an inch or a centimetre or 3, 4, 5 centimetres difference between Hamilton and Vettel the other way, then Hamilton would have got past Sebastian Vettel as well. So he did not have the best start. He was locking up in quite a few corners, destroying his tyres. So he made hard work for himself, Sebastian Vettel did. But what else is in the Japanese Grand Prix? Grosjean, I think we have to give a good strong word for Grosjean. He did a fantastic race, to be fair. One of the best races I think Grosjean's done for a very long time. To come from 3rd on the grid, from where he came from, to... I don't think he came from 3rd, sorry, my mistake. But he got to the front of the grid, and being 1st into the first corner was a great start, and he was able to hold that lead, held Mark Webber off beautifully. I know that there was a bit of twinkle toes between, we're not going to push him yet, just keep this 2-second gap behind Grosjean, don't press him too much in order to save the tyres, which Mark Webber had a problem on, and people saying that Mark Webber's having to free stop was a problem for him in the race, which led to Sebastian Vettel winning that race, because they say if Mark Webber pitted twice, then he would have won that race. But then, notoriously, Mark Webber is harder on his tyres. So therefore, and it's been evident in the past that he needs to pit more often. And I'm going to go back to Malaysia quickly before I go back to Grosjean, is that in Malaysia, Mark Webber had to go on the harder tyre in order to finish the race, in order to keep to the strategy that they were doing instead of making an extra stop. So therefore, and that's what led Sebastian Vettel was on the medium compound tyre, to catch up to Mark Webber, and then, eventually overtake him and cause that whole controversy back in Malaysia, because Mark Webber couldn't go on the medium compound tyre because he knew that he would wear him out too quickly. And that was Mark Webber's problem in the Japanese Grand Prix, is that he wore his tyres out too quickly and was forced to make 3 stops. And he didn't really make the medium tyres in the end really work for him, but he did get stuck behind Grosjean for too many laps, which caused the race to lose its excitement, because it was drilled up to be Mark Webber versus Sebastian Vettel if Mark Webber got past Grosjean, but he was unable to do that. So therefore, Sebastian Vettel went really unopposed to his But going back to Romain Grosjean, he's doing well so far. He's really come on. It's a completely different Grosjean to what we've seen. Whether there's still debate of whether he will be at Lotus next year, but I think I'm about 95-98% certain that he'll be at Lotus next year, probably alongside Nico Hülkenberg, but we'll get into that story later. Or Felipe Massa is another contender, but I don't think Felipe Massa will go to Lotus, but I think his name is definitely in the hat. But if I was Eric Boullier, I wouldn't be taking Felipe Massa for other reasons, which I'll get into in a minute. But that was really the Japanese Grand Prix. There wasn't much else drama elsewhere. Hülkenberg putting on another outstanding race for Sauber, showing his brilliance, which we'll get onto a little bit more later on in this podcast. But with Japan, it was a good race. It wasn't. I'd agree with quite a few people in the paddock, like Martin Brundle, saying that it wasn't as good as probably Korea. It didn't have all the dramas down the grid like Korea had that Japan didn't have, but it was a good race nonetheless, enjoyable for an early start in the morning. But moving on to like the news section of this week and what's come out this week, and quite an interesting story actually has developed at Williams involving Pastor Maldonado. Apparently that he is looking for a way out of the team, so it was thought at first that the team were going to get rid of him, but it looks more and more like the driver Pastor Maldonado wants to now leave Williams because he's not really having the car. And it's true, once Williams gave him the car last year, Williams were quick, and Pastor Maldonado was up there, and he showed that he was a good driver for a paid driver. But then, Williams are very inconsistent with how they make their cars. 2011, they made a horrible car. 2012, they made a fantastic car. But 2013, they made a horrible car. So, and I don't think Pastor Maldonado is very happy with that because, his talent is sort of being undermined because he's not really in a car that can challenge. But the only team that he's been linked with moving to at the moment, which will bring his, obviously, Venezuelan money with him, is to Sauber, which we all know about Sauber's financial troubles, that he could go to Sauber and maybe partner Sergei Sorokin, and with Pastor Maldonado's experience could be able to teach Sorokin a thing or two, or maybe he could be with Esteban Gutierrez. I think it would be harsh, especially with the way Esteban Gutierrez has come on of late, to drop Esteban Gutierrez. I think over the last couple, if it was the first beginning of the season, I would have said, yeah, Gutierrez, you've got a point to prove, really, because, yeah, you could be out of the sport in the year, at the end of the year. But from the last couple of races, I've been really impressed with Gutierrez, so I don't think that he deserves to be kicked out of the sport, but, Formula 1 is a tough business. But yeah, and so Sauber was one team that Pastor Maldonado's got one of his foot in, and the other foot he's got is in Force India. Now we all know that Force India have not confirmed their lineup. We don't know if Paul di Resta or Adrian City will stay at Force India for next season. With increasingly Paul di Resta's long bad runs, getting a few heads twisted and a few people scratching their head at Force India whether they want to keep Paul di Resta, which is a shame because Paul di Resta, he is a very good driver. He's a very talented driver. But he's made a lot of mistakes, and I'm not going to be biased because he's British and I'm British. I think there's a few better drivers out there than Paul di Resta, but Paul di Resta is definitely talented. But I think he's learned all he needed to learn at Force India. That's why I think he needs to move from that team and try and find a bigger team out there, such as Lotus. He needed to put, McLaren. He could be talking to McLaren to replace Sergio Perez, but I think he's learned all he can learn at Force India, and he needs to have that step that moves him on into a quicker team. Whereas because people like Nico Hülkenberg, who are having that outstanding race now, that in the crunch time of the season, which Paul di Resta was doing well at Singapore, but then he binned it into the wall. He just made too many mistakes. I think he's been pushing too hard, and I sympathise for Paul di Resta at that moment because he is working so hard to try and not get undermined again this season by a top team. But because he's pushing too hard and trying to overdrive the car, he's making the mistakes, which is costing him in effect. So I think he's just pushing too hard. And we all know that in the past, Paul di Resta has beaten Sebastian Vettel in the younger Formula Series, Formula 3 I believe it was, that he beat Sebastian Vettel comfortably, in the same car. So we all know Paul di Resta's got the talent, but he's not in the car. And I think it kind of annoys Paul di Resta seeing like Sebastian Vettel at the top, knowing that he's beaten him and knowing that he's not in a car that can challenge Sebastian Vettel. And, his learning curve is sort of, plateaued in a way, because I think he's learned all he can learn at Force India. So hopefully, I don't know whether Maldonado will move from Williams, but it's just the latest news story that's come out. And it looks like that Nico Hülkenberg, though, is virtually just got to put pen to paper, basically, at Lotus at the moment. Because with contracts, I think he deserves to go to Lotus. I've said this many times before now on these podcasts. Felipe Massa was in there and they thought with experience, yeah, Felipe Massa's good. But Felipe Massa's had his chance at a top team at Ferrari and he did well, post-crash, pre-crash, sorry. But after the crash, which is post, it wasn't so good for Felipe Massa, sorry. But before, he was challenging with titles 2007, 2008, the crash in 2009, 2010. To be fair, he did well in 2010 and hit Germany 2010, and I think that's what kicked Felipe Massa into this downward spiral that he's been ever since, really, and has got up but then been shunted back down again because he knows his place in the team, which is a shame for a Ferrari youth driver to not really make it all the way and win a championship with Ferrari. We were so close to in 2008. And I think if he did win the championship in 2008, maybe it wouldn't be so, the 2010 incident wouldn't have happened in Germany, because there would have still been a lot of faith around Felipe Massa because he won the championship. But he didn't, and that's what happened. But I think Felipe Massa's had his chance, and it's time for young, fresh blood like Nico Hülkenberg to go in there and show us really what he's got for next season and for years to come, and hopefully make another challenge towards Sebastian Vettel. But that is mainly it for the Japanese review podcast. Bit of Japan and a bit of news. Can't go too wrong, really. Next Grand Prix is India. Yeah, again, there's another circuit which Red Bull should go strong at. Every driver likes India, and it's also its last Grand Prix. It might return in 2015, but it's not on the calendar for 2014. But that is really all I have left to say, and all I really have time to say. All that I have left to say really is thank you very much for listening and to this podcast, and please remember to subscribe for more stuff. Visit www.f1breakdown.co.uk to see the latest news stories, up-to-date information on what is going around Formula 1 over the last couple of races. Like us on Facebook, get all Twitter, follow us on Twitter, get all instant updates from Facebook and Twitter. And yet again, thank you very much for listening, and we will catch you in the Indian pre-review podcast. Thank you very much. Goodbye.